weeks who told me I am definitely the person you need to be talking to.
It's just the mindset, exploring those different ways to approach.
This is an official presentation of SDR Insider. Welcome to Mac and Zach in the Morning, your home for all things sales, business development, and beyond. With over 4 decades of combined experience in the field, please welcome your hosts and daily practitioners of the craft, Mark Mack and Zach Bauer.
Well, that was cool.
Oh, that was fun, Sprat. I clicked the wrong button. I had that uploaded because I was going to show it to you the other day, and I grabbed the wrong one. So
no, I was like, are we pouring shots of what was that? Shots of
espresso
in shot glasses.
Yeah, man, SDR fuel. That's right.
Oh, cheers.
That's what I have. I have espresso
welcome
too.
Everybody. Welcome Julie. Welcome Zaya. Welcome Mark. Welcome Zach. What's going on? Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I was going to say this was going to be the last show of the year, but I think I scheduled one for next Thursday too.
Perfect.
Quite ironically, another SDR coming on. We got to get an SDR leader. Another SDR coming on to shoot their shot. And so if anybody's been watching this or listening to this, I should say, in the last couple of weeks, we've been bringing some people on, SDRs and BDRs who have lost their job, to give them an opportunity to shoot their shot and potentially get a formal interview with the SDR leader that we brought on. And it's been successful. Last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, Jonathan Scott Lewis has a job now, not with the company that we set him up with, but at least he got a job. So if this doesn't exactly land you the job with the person that we connect you with here, but it gives you the confidence to move into other interviews with some more positivity and some more, skills, if you will, like sharpening your skills, then kudos, man. Then it was all worth it for us, I think, right?
Yeah, no doubt. It's really exciting to see, some opportunities come together and at least if nothing else, just, support people and give them a platform to, talk about what they've done, what they can do, and, hopefully make some connections along the way. So it's been very, very cool to be a part of too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, listen. So today we got Zaya Chetty here. Zaya Chetty coming in from HotRecruiter.io. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And Zaya is going to be giving some people some pointers and tips on, how to set yourself up for a good interview. In the next hour or so, he'll be dropping some tidbits of his own on how you guys can improve your interviewing skills. And if we get enough people watching, if at all, then maybe we'll bring an SDR, if they're in the audience, up to shoot his shot. And then you could tell him a little bit about how to improve that. And maybe they could do it again. And then, hopefully they could get something out of it too. But I think it's unfortunate. There's been a lot of layoffs, and anything that anybody can do about it, we're here to help. So talk to us, Zaya. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so a little bit more about HotRecruiter. So I've been doing career coaching full time for the last 5 months now, or 7 months now. Time is going by so fast. But yeah, so I've been doing career coaching where I'm pretty much helping candidates with their resumes, LinkedIn profiles, optimizing it, teaching them how to network. So what I do is I kind of take people from, I want to say, the ground up. So people that don't know what role that they're want to get into, they, don't know what industry, they don't know what would be the best fit, and then I kind of create a strategy so then we can go and attack the job search, because it's not as easy as it was even last year to get into a role.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I've been doing now. A little bit more into my plans, my kind of second tier plan that I recommend for job seekers. I go and I find them 5 jobs a week. And then what I do is I go and I find the hiring managers and the recruiters on my end, so then that way we can network our way in.
Oh, that's awesome. What made you start? I mean, you're a pretty savvy guy. I mean, we had a nice conversation the other day. I had a lot of fun talking to you. I'm curious, like, what just like other than like, were you always interested in just the recruiting space, or were you interested in something else that didn't work out? Talk to me about how you got into this, because you are kind
Yeah.
of young, but that doesn't preclude you obviously from having expertise. I'm just curious, like, not everybody necessarily like they dream about going to a company and building that kind of skill set. So what made you go and say, hey, I just want to help other people get jobs?
Yeah, so I feel like this is like a long story, but like how it kind of started was I've always had that sort of entrepreneur mindset. So like even like growing up, I feel like I've had like 10 businesses like growing up already, like trying to get them from the ground up. And then when I was going to college, I got a job working at Cracker Barrel. And I was going to school for hotel and restaurant management. And then I got a promotion. They were like, hey, if you want to move back to Texas, there's an HR manager position available. Do you want it? And I dropped out. I took that position um, at, right before I turned 19. So I was 18 years old as a manager at Cracker Barrel. Worked there for a couple of years. And then um, when the pandemic hit, I moved to like an operations manager position at a coffee shop. And then from there, I became like a director of operations for like 3 different businesses, and then I moved back to Portland, and I was like, "Okay, enough is enough. I wanna break into tech. I'm tired of going in person. I'm tired of getting sick. I'm tired of, dealing with employees in real life. It's so much easier, I feel like it would be to manage a team remotely because you don't have to deal with all of the stupid petty stuff." And I started applying, and I was like, "Okay, like, what can I get into?" And I was like, my favorite part has always been like recruiting and like, kind of training people. And so I was like, what role has that? And I was like, recruiting does. And then I became like a tech recruiter where I was hiring for like the business side and then for the tech side. I touched so many different roles in that company. And then after that, I became a full cycle recruiter for an agency. And then
Awesome.
I realized, I like candidates a little bit more than I like hiring managers. Uh, yeah, that was my full growth of I was tired of because my whole thing was, okay, like I'm putting all of this effort into my candidates, and I was like, the hiring manager's not gonna speak to them. Like, what? Like that's kind of crazy.
What do you think about
uh,
these guys who, like, they interview you, or they like bring you in for like there's so many topics we could unpack here. I gotta tell you, but I guess I'll narrow the question down, like because you kind of just mentioned it, like you go through these BDR, SDR, AE, whatever, any job, right? You go through these interviews, and then all of a sudden, like and you're having good interviews, like there's good
mhm.
rapport being built, and then you get ghosted
Yeah,
forever.
so
Like you
I feel
never
like
know. Like you just assume I didn't get the job, right? And isn't that
mhm.
like, how do you like, what do you think of that kind of stuff?
So I always say ghosting. I feel like okay, some recruiters like intentionally, but most recruiters like it's like an accidental thing. Like we have so many tabs open, it's like, oh, I'm typing, your rejection letter or whatever, and then I get a call from my hiring manager that wants to send an offer letter to the candidate that just interviewed now. And it's like I'm trying to do 4 things at once, and it's like sometimes you close the tab that your message was like halfway completed on.
Hmm.
So I feel like there's like accidental ghostings versus like deliberate, like, ooh, like we messed him up, like let's ghost him type of thing. I feel like it's not usually intentional.
I was kind of thinking, like, maybe in some cases it's hard. Well, first of all, nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, right? Especially around Christmas, but
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know, and then like I always thought maybe there was some kind of legal thing behind it where, like, because people want to know why they didn't get the job, and like you can't really say. Well, first of all, if you're a recruiter, it's very difficult to say because you may not have gotten any feedback from from the
The hiring
company
manager.
or the hiring manager, or if whatever feedback you did get, you don't want to give to the candidate, right? Because it was like, oh, that guy sucked or whatever. But like, like I was thinking, like, maybe there's like a libelness. Is it libel? Was that the word? I don't know.
Liability.
No,
Um,
no. Well, when you're, yeah, but it's like when you talk about when you're saying something about somebody, there's the liability is that you're liable, like you're liable to that statement. I think that's the word for it. I'm no lawyer, but yeah, it's just like you're afraid you don't want to say anything wrong, like, or that you could be sued. Like, God forbid you say something that has anything that could be misconstrued as slander. Thank you, Julie. Like something that's slanderous, like, or like, don't want to imply that they didn't get hired because they live in a certain area or they're of a certain race or gender or whatever. I think there's a lot of sensitivity to that. So I always kind of thought maybe that's the reason why you never got any feedback.
Yeah, so I was like, it depends. So, I was working for like a late stage MarTech startup, and there was like a lot of rules. So like hiring managers had to type in their feedback forms, just so then that way like you can make sure you're still compliable to like all of those different I can't think of the word, but pretty much like so you aren't being racist. So you aren't like so you actually have reasons to rejecting these candidates. And so I kind of leaned on that when it came down to hiring managers giving me like the bare minimum answers. Like there was one time all I got was literally just NO. Like that's it. And I was like
What do you do with that?
I was like, NO. I was like, and I literally all I said, I was like, please complete your feedback form. And I was like, I'll go break the news. But in my head, I was like, why? I was like, I need something because I don't know. For me, I always gave like feedback when they asked. I don't give feedback unless it was for I want to say like just like final rounds or like, kind of second, third stages. Cause I feel like people in the phone screen like um, or like application stage don't really need feedback because it's like you're either a fit or you're not a fit type of thing. Um, but later stages, I kind of always give feedback just because I'm like, oh, okay, like this is what they said about your presentation, or it's not a fit because we have other candidates in the pipeline or things like that.
Well, the other thing too, maybe is that like there could be reasons why, and I'm not talking maybe even if when we used to have more face-to-face interviews, there could be reasons why I guess there's a whole host of reasons why you may not get hired,
Mm-hmm.
because of something that happened during the interview that you were completely unaware of. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example for myself, and then me being interviewed, and then being the interviewer. I went on an interview for a company. It was a building products company. I was completely qualified for it. I mean, maybe I was even overqualified for it. I don't know. I drove up or flew up to Boston for a day to meet with not only the hiring manager again, who met me in New York a week before, but to meet a bunch of other people, a couple of other managers, line managers, similar line managers to him, and a big person and an HR woman. And I thought I had great rapport with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I had good interviews with everybody. There was one of the women that interviewed me, I guess, I don't know, it wasn't as sort of smiley and laughy as all the other ones. She was a bit more serious. I don't know. But I still think it went well. I mean, I know sometimes when you do get those people, you kind of walk away and go, oh, that was terrible. She's not going to hire me. It wasn't even like
Mm-hmm.
that. It was just very kind of basic. She kind of really stuck to a couple of quick questions. I think she really had something else on her mind or whatever. And then, I got home and then I didn't get the job. And I was like, this is like, what could it have been? And I thought about what I was wearing, how I acted, what I said, where I was looking during the meeting or whatever. I don't know. You just never know, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think on it could have been that. It could have been maybe the way I was sitting, maybe I didn't look like I was as interested in the job, maybe all those
Mm-hmm.
things come into factor when you're face to face. There's a lot of that stuff you could kind of curb being on a video chat or over a phone call. But I don't know. Maybe it's just there was somebody else that actually was more qualified than me. I always kind of wrap it up to that, but who knows? Like, what do
Yeah.
you think? What do you think's been like people's like, what have you seen? I mean, because you were in the recruiting space still before COVID, right? So when people were face to face, what would you say
Mm-hmm.
is kind of the biggest difference now that, because you mentioned being remote is kind of
Mm-hmm.
the new thing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, I was kind of hiring like different people if you think about it. So I was hiring like servers, I was hiring, hosts, I was hiring like baristas, things like that. So I feel like I'm looking for different things now, if that makes sense. Because like in tech,
Mhm.
I'd say like SDRs or like I was hiring for like data analytics. Like those are roles that are you kind of look for like black and white skills first, and then you go to looking for like, okay, are they a storyteller? Are they a team player? Are they different things like that? Um, I don't know. I would say, hmm,
Yeah,
I'd say yeah,
like looks and the way
looks
they
don't really
dress.
matter as much. Yeah, like
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
I was like,
it's
as long as you
important if
know,
you're in hospitality. Like you should look a little like pleasant,
Should be put
and
together,
hmm
right?
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. For me, I remember being like excited when somebody would come in with like a printed resume because I was like, oh, like they have their stuff together, like thank goodness. But I feel like now that's kind of like nobody has like a printed resume. Like I don't know, I'm not in person doing stuff, but I feel like it's all digital anyways. But I know like before, like I used to get people like dressed in like full suits almost to come, and I was like, oh, they're like, this is my first job interview, and like, my mom helped me get ready. But like here, I feel like some people kind of come in like a crumpled up T-shirt. Like I've had somebody join an interview with like a like shirt that looked like it was crumpled in a drawer, and he like just threw it on and like bedhead, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like I can't send you.
yeah. That's just
I feel
wrong. Like
Yeah.
you should know better than that, right? Like even if
yeah.
it's video, like you can't be looking like disheveled. It's like
Yeah,
Wes, right? When Wes interviewed, I said Wes because Wes, we know Wes, right?
Yeah.
Wes always used to wear this like T-shirt. He looked like the kid on that TV show where they talk about the way they clean clothes so it doesn't look like it's washed. He had like this
mhm.
messed up collar on his white, underwear T-shirt, and I was like, dude, when you interview, you best put on a shirt. He's like,
Yeah.
I know. He's like, I wear that all the time. I was like, yeah. So some people they don't. I guess I don't know. Maybe it's the age. If you're really young and you're so used to
Mhm.
just this, maybe
Mhm.
maybe you don't know better. Uh,
It's
Yeah, like there's no like lessons on business etiquette. So
well,
there's so many things I had to learn.
yeah. Well, I mean, look at how we do things now. We're beanies, ball caps, and Santa hat. Like you would never do this, like in face to face. Let's get real. Like we're different
I
world.
used
When I first was breaking into tech sales, right? This is like what 6-7 years ago now. Um, I I interviewed face to face, right? The interviewer flew out to my city, and we met, and I had to borrow a pair of dress shoes, right? Because I didn't have something nice to wear at the time.
Mhm.
Because I'm wearing like work boots all the time, right? So I didn't have any of that. I wore a suit, and had a nice collared shirt, and the whole 9 yards, right? Got the
and
job,
the work boots.
and then a few years later, right? I'm out there scouting for a new job, and I'm interviewing with like startup companies and stuff on Zoom calls, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, I'm gonna dress for the job that I want, right? Still kind of have that mentality. So you show up wearing, a blazer or whatever, and these guys are in, t-shirts and shit, and like I'm losing jobs because I'm overdressed. Like I don't get like we're in a sweatshirt culture now, like
Wow.
in this space in particular. So it's just funny how things shift
It's
and
more
perceptions
business
are different.
cash.
Yeah, yeah, very
I
much.
remember when I went to apply at Cracker Barrel. This was in like 2018, and I remember walking in. I had like my dress shirt on. It was snowing. It was in Flagstaff, Arizona, snowing. And so I had like pajama pants like underneath like this like giant pair of like nice pants. And I remember going in and like dropping off my resume in person. And I was like so scared. I was like, uh, but I don't know. I feel like the culture has shifted because like now, like this is what I would wear, like something, like this. And I'm definitely wearing sweatpants underneath. So, the culture definitely has shifted.
It's weird because I think there is something, those little things like when we were face to face, like those little things definitely have some value, right? To look
Mhm.
at.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll give you an example. Because it could tell you about a person to a certain degree, like you said, put together, Zach, right? Like because you could see somebody you could see if somebody's not put together in a certain way, it could reflect on their business discipline or whatever.
Sure.
I remember I was interviewing. I used to work for a seating shop, and I was interviewing a rep. And our building was kind of difficult to find, right? And like even if you give somebody the address, what happens is like the address was dead on where the building was, the pin, but you had to kind of drive. It was weird when you drove close to it. You had to drive through a. You had to drive through a. Like another parking lot to get to it. Like so, it was if you didn't know, you would be like when you came into the parking lot, there was these trailers that were in your way, and you kind of had to go right around the trailer. And if you're pulling up and you never been there before, you might go, "Oh, where am I?" and get lost, right? And so this one kid that came, he was obviously getting lost because the appointment was like 10 o'clock, and all of a sudden it's like 10 after 10, and I haven't even gotten a phone call yet. And that's my biggest pet peeve. If you're going to be late to an interview, especially a face-to-face interview in the New York, New Jersey area, it's okay. Okay, we understand that there's traffic. We all live here. You have to be smart enough to at least make a phone call. So that was already the first sign that I was like, okay, why isn't this kid giving me a call yet, right? And so I decided to call him at 10 minutes after. And he was like, I'm trying to find where you guys are. And I was like, okay, not a problem. I was like, where are you? I'm like, just stop your car wherever you are. Because I figured he was somewhere within the kind of grounds of the area, within the acre, if you will. And I said, don't go anywhere. I'll come out and I'll get you, right? So he kind of tells me where he is. I go out I go outside, I go downstairs through the warehouse, down the back way, out back, go down the block, whatever. And I see him, he's all the way down this other block. And so I walk down there and now at this point, I'm like, I might as well drive in his car with him back to the front of our building, right? And park. And so he could come in and interview. And so I come up to the car and I open the door. I kind of knocked on the window. I'm like, hey, it's Mark. And I open the door, and I'm not even joking you. On the floor of the passenger seat was about 2,000 receipts, napkins, food boxes. I mean, it was like the most ridiculous thing. I've never seen a car like this before. I mean, I used to basically live in my car, also live and work in my car. And I sometimes had maybe a banana peel or a McDonald's cup or a coffee cup under the seat or whatever, one or two things, maybe some paper or a napkin or whatever. And my friend Richie used to bust my balls about that. Like his car was immaculate. But this was out of control. This was like, I couldn't even put my feet down on the floor. Like it was like, I put my feet down on all of this crap. And then that wasn't even the worst part. When I sat down and I shook his hand and I said, hello. I looked on the dashboard. There was like an inch's worth of dust on the dashboard of his car. And I'm going, okay.
I'd be like, got back out the car. I'm like,
so we drive around and we park and I'm going like, I already came this far with the kid. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll interview him and see, maybe this isn't like a sign of how he really is in his life or whatever. And long story short, the guy couldn't even come up. I brought him upstairs. I interviewed him. He couldn't even come up with a success story. He had absolutely no success stories. And I actually bring this up because I wanted to transition into what you think, Zaya, is sort of like, because I've always, it's weird because like early in my day, I never thought about as I went on my day-to-day to capture all of my wins and my success stories. So early on in my career, I always had maybe some difficulty in like when somebody would ask me a question and a success story would be a good answer, I didn't have it. And so when I started interviewing later in my career, like with this guy, I asked that question. I'm like, tell me about give me a success story. Tell me a story of some level of success you've had. And this guy couldn't come up with a single story. I was just like, have a nice day. Eventually we obviously didn't hire him. But how important is that? And what do you think people can do to frame success stories properly for an interview? Or what do you think? Like, I mean, today there's so much tech to capture all that and probably look back on it. But what's your take on that?
So I actually stole this tip from Adriana Ball on a live stream. She said that she keeps like I forgot what she calls it, but like all of her wins, metrics, screenshots, like recommendation letters, anything like that. She has it all in a folder on her laptop. So she has like screenshots of everything she needs, like so then that way, like if anybody ever asks, she just kind of, is like, okay, like let me grab something from the vault type of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's what I recommend now to all of my clients. I'm like, go gather your metrics, especially the ones that haven't left their job yet and like they're like silently job seeking. I'm like, grab all of this because as soon as you say you're leaving, it's gonna disappear forever. And then you're gonna have to, guesstimate. And it's a lot better if you have like those metrics. And then what I recommend doing now, because the job search is kind of tricky, if you do get an interview, just creating like a little slide deck about yourself, have your like resume, like some like highlight information from your resume, having those like highlight metrics, like look, now you can see it with your eyes. It's not just me making it up. These are actual snapshots from Q1, whatever. Um, so then that way, you're kind of separating yourself from everybody else.
I think that's such a powerful thing. I've done that kind of intuitively for years, I guess. Like compiled. My grandpa always encouraged me to create a paper trail, right? And I think that's kind of where that stems from. But it's so important to have documentation of everything that you've done and your accomplishments. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes time to pull that out, like you've got receipts for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just a great tip. Do you feel like people approach that in the right way when they start to um, dive into those things in interviews? Like how do you start that conversation?
Yeah, so I feel like to bring that up, you mean like bring up that
Yeah.
presentation or something like that? I would send that like with my follow-up. Like, so what I do is I usually write like super kind of simply, and then like when I'm sending my follow-up, like, oh, because I usually, if I do make a presentation, then I kind of talk about it in my interview. So then that way I like to send my follow-ups like immediately afterwards. So then that way it's like, oh, okay, they have it right there. They're still thinking about you. They're probably typing that whatever up about your interview. So then that way, they can kind of reference that and like look at it and be like, oh, like these are literally all of the points he brought up. Or if I'm talking like directly to like a CEO, founder type of thing, um, I'm just like, hey, like, can I share this with you and talk you through it while we're on the call? Um, I feel like that helps too. Kind of shows like, like some people do like 30, 60, 90-day plans. I rather do like a little highlight reel. Like, this is what I can do. This is what I can bring type of thing.
I think 30, 60, 90 is blown out of proportion for some people. Like there's no reason, if especially depending on the role, like unless you're going for like a VP of sales role.
Hmm.
But it's funny because any 30, 60, 90 is pretty much the same no matter what role you're in, really. The first 30 days is learn.
Hmm.
Learn the company, learn the product, learn the people, learn the pace, learn the process, learn like what else are you going to say? Oh, I'm going to close 3 deals in my first day, in my first month. Like, no, it's not.
Yeah, no,
That's
that's
not
why
your
I was
third. That's not your goal.
Yeah, we had that in our process for SDRs, and it always confused me. But it honestly, what it kind of showed is the people that have that critical thinking skills and that don't, if that makes sense. So, like, some SDRs were like completely like, what do you mean 30, 60, 90-day plan? Like, I'm just going to show up. And then it kind of, like it shows the flip side because I feel like SDR is still like an entry level role. And so you get like all kinds of candidates, ones that are prepared, ones that have been in sales, ones that kind of know what they want to do, and then other people that are like, oh, I just heard that this role you can make a lot of money. Like I've never cold called. I don't know what an SDR is. And I feel like a 30, 60, 90-day plan kind of a little bit weans it out, but I'm more team practical skills. So like show me a cold email, let's do a cold call, like type of thing.
I think if you, I think if you are somebody who is never okay. So let's say you're interviewing and you're interviewing a bunch of people, and let's say you're interviewing several that have little to no experience. There's going to
Hmm.
be a distinct difference with them. One of them or two of them are going to come out and say, you're going to notice that they've done homework, that they actually do
Hmm.
understand what the SDR role is or is about. And hey, and then they'll talk to you hopefully about the things that they've done to learn about the role, to learn about your company. Maybe they'll tell you, oh, I spoke with some folks in your company, some SDRs. I'm taking an SDR boot camp, blah, blah, blah. And then there's going to be the ones that say exactly what you said, which is, I don't know. I just want to make a lot of money, And while there's nothing wrong with that and that intent, you're not leaning into it enough for me, or for
and
anybody
think about the
versus
ramp
somebody
time.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's kind of black and white too on the ramp time. So it's like somebody that already has like knowledge of what an SDR is, you don't have to go and teach them. This is what an SDR does. This is you pick up the phones, you call people. Like no hiring manager wants to do that. Nobody wants to teach you how to crawl and walk and run and jump and fly. Like, they want somebody that can, meet them a little bit more of the way. So then that way it's more of like a little cherry pick and you can kind of pick the candidates that already, know. And there are definitely candidates that don't have like the same amount of knowledge that can do the role well. But I feel like it just comes down to, showing your drive and energy like in the interview. And like if you're a driver of conversation, I'll take a chance on you.
Yeah, I think that's just it. The pace of the conversation, if it dies or it's this, or you're not really answering the question. Like, I'm a big believer in saying, did that answer your question in an interview after I answered the question, just to get confirmation that it did or it didn't. I think that question, though, sometimes is weird because they go, oh, yeah, sure. Meanwhile, they're writing down like you didn't answer the question, right? Like, give me a second chance if I didn't answer it properly,
So what I do is I kind of save that to the end, and I usually say like, do you have any reservations in moving me forward to the next round? Then they say like yes or no, and then I go into closing for the next interview. I'm like, well, this is when I'm available. What works for you? Like type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because like I think it's just so different now, right? Because there's so much opportunity, and the fact that companies are now looking remotely, there's probably so much more competition, even like because now you can recruit from anywhere, so you're up against hundreds instead of dozens, and it's probably scary for a lot of people. I mean, who actually just got let go, or I think it's just a matter of course. We'll see. I think we'll see in the new year, January, February. I think there'll be a big push in hiring, and things like SDR jobs will come back, and they'll just because look, I mean, top of funnel sales, and Zach and I, we both know this pretty solidly, is the lifeblood of an organization. Like, so, if you're not otherwise going to be total PLG or totally social or inbound or whatever, you got to have a sales team.
Yeah.
I never understood the mindset of. Oh, I was gonna say I never understood the mindset of like letting go your sales team, like when layoffs, like for layoffs. I feel like those roles should be safe. Like lay off somebody else. Like I don't know. That's just me. Unless it's like just like I don't know. If I was a CEO, I feel like I'd be like, okay, managers, who are the underperformers? We need to cut some, cut some people out. But I feel like some of these layoffs are like kind of random. But
Can you speak to some of the companies that are laying off people in droves like that on sales teams, and then a few weeks later you see them backfill those positions?
yeah, I've seen that a lot actually. I can't think of any companies off the top of my head. I'm not like directly
You
like
don't have to
recruiting
name
for
drop
them.
them, but
Yeah.
we're all
We
seeing
don't
it.
want to do that.
Yeah.
We want to get some
I was-
sponsors,
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, I don't. But I definitely have seen that, and I'm like, I don't know. I was on the phone with one of my clients, and I was like, this company just did layoffs like last month, and I was like, why are they hiring for this? And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just mind my business. I'm gonna just keep doing my thing.
I don't know what it is, man. I think there are some things about this world of tech and tech sales that I still probably are a little bit foreign to me in a way, but it's like the whole kind of VC funded company that just is forced to do things because all of a sudden there was a board meeting one day and they said, look, you're hemorrhaging money and you need to cut some people, and they don't care. Like they're just like, you need to cut $150,000 of payroll a week, whatever it is. And the sales directors and the CEOs and whatever, they don't know what else to do, right? And they figure, like, just like what you said, they're going to have to take a look at the underperformers. And that's another thing too, by the way. I mean, I'm sure we all know this. A lot of people who have been let go in the last, call it 2 months, were underperformers, and that's why they were let go, right? They weren't let go in a layoff. They were fired for underperformance, right? And we need to recognize that, right? And it doesn't, and I'm not saying that they can't be successful in another company. Extremely, they could go on to be the best rep in another company. That's not what I'm not saying that they're shitty or that they suck and that they should be fired, but they were fired because they didn't perform in that role, in that job at that time, in a critical time where money and revenue was important. And it's unfortunate, and they had to be they had to get let go for that reason. And listen, I guess to a certain degree, I don't blame some of these owners or founders or whatever that have to do this. I mean, look, a lot of people are bootstrapped too, and they're doing that, right? Because it's coming out of their own pocket. And like I was just thinking about the Celtics thing, Zach, the other day, and I'm like, okay, well, they let everybody else go. Well, what are they doing? Well, chances are, my guess is, and I just is just based on what I know about Dean and those guys, is that they're probably going to rework the app, rework the system, the tool. They're going to come out again at some point, with a new play, right? And so why keep a sales team now? Like, why would I keep an overhead of such when I'm kind of rebuilding from the ground up again, or trying to reformulate how I'm going to go to market? And that's what's happening. So I think there's probably a lot of companies out there who are rethinking their go-to-market strategy. And over the course of the next 2 months, call it from the beginning of December to the end of January, they decided, why carry a sales team? Right? Why carry an overhead and salaries and whatever? Because they're not going to perform anyway. I really hate the people who think that December and January are the worst months of the year. I remember I got hired. I worked for Sherwin-Williams many, many moons ago, right? And I was training with another rep who was like the east side of Manhattan. I was on the west side of Manhattan. And I remember him telling me something, one very specific. He was telling me the lay of the land, giving me the culture and everything. And then he goes, but be careful of December. He's like, you don't want to close any big deals in December. I was like, what? I don't understand. Like, what do you mean? You don't want to close any deal or big deals in December? He goes, because then you're going to have to repeat it plus, because it was always like, every year you get an increase in your target, right? And so if you do this huge deal in December, next December, you're going to try to either have to match it or get bigger, obviously, because you've got an increased target. And I was like, I'll worry about that next December, or next October, right? And like, I just never understood that, right? And I think that December could be a great time for people, right? It could be a great time to have conversations because people are in holiday mode, and maybe they are a little, like today, tomorrow, next Thursday with the phone-a-thon that's going on. I don't expect to get anybody on the phone, honestly, next Thursday. But I think people misjudge December. Like, it could be a really good month. I've closed some really great deals in December, and never thought about next December that I'm going to have to double it. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'd say for recruiting, December is just the worst, just because, like you have to wait on all of these approvals. And like, I was in a hiring process for that MarTech startup, and they had unlimited PTO. So it was like the VP of talent acquisition was off for a month. And it's like, I needed that signature, and they had to call her. They're like, hey, we know you're off, but we need him to start January, like the first week. And like, can you sign this? And she did, and thank God it worked out. But it was like the most drawn out process, because it was like she was adding, like, she's like, oh, I'm gone for 2 weeks. They're like, oh, we'll wait 2 weeks, and then had to wait. So I know that that's happening at some other companies as well. So just be patient with your recruiters. They're trying.
Yeah.
So Zay, you told me the other day you had a couple of questions, key questions that are always come up in your interviews. Tell the audience what those questions are and what you look for in those answers and how they can improve those, their interview skills with respect to those particular questions.
Yeah, so I feel like every SDR should have an answer to these three questions. Like, why do you want to be in sales? Why do you want to work for this company? And why should we like pick you out of anybody else? And so those are like the only three questions I ask in like an SDR pre-screening because you can kind of see a lot from those. So if you don't have an answer, like why sales? So I don't want to hear the answer, oh, I want to create solutions for customers, like things like that, because if I put you in front of a hiring manager, they're going to yell at me and say, "Why'd you just give me somebody for customer success?" I'm gonna have to. So I was like, "That's a customer success answer." Not my words, but quoting from a lot of hiring managers. Because the right answer to that question is, I'm hungry, I'm never satisfied, I'm competitive, I was in sports, and I like being top of the leaderboard, type of thing. Like those are the right answers. Why sales? Like you can even say, I want to have a commission because I like competing with myself and I want to make a lot of money. Like that's a great answer. I'll put you in front of a hiring manager. The next one, why do you want to work for the company? If you don't have a good answer of why you want to work for the company, should you work for the company? Probably not. So I always tell all of my candidates, I'm like, okay, go do some research, like, dig a little deep, like find the company values, see what the company's about, look at the CEO on LinkedIn. Like if it's a vibe you can, go forward, like go for it. And then the last question is why you're the best fit. If you can't pitch yourself about why you're the best fit, I have 20 other people that can. So that's why I always, tell everybody, why are you the best fit? What can you fit into like a 3-minute elevator pitch? Like, let's get it, let's go.
Yeah, those are it's funny. They sound like very easy questions to answer, but so much could be revealed from those answers. It's interesting. So Zach, let me ask you this: why do you want to work for Title?
For Title, well, I
What did you say?
what did I say?
Back in October or whatever it was?
Yeah.
Or better yet, did Ryan ask you that question when you interviewed with him?
Yeah, probably. That's a bit of a unique situation, so I'm not gonna get into that, I guess.
Well, Ryan's gonna hear this later. He's gonna be like, "Why do you want to work for me, man?"
Yeah, he's gonna text me, be like, "What's going on here?" No, I think you're spot on the money though, Zay. I mean, and I always think of like screening interviews very much like a cold call, in that you want to give enough in those interactions to be appealing, right? Make them curious to move you forward, but not so much. And maybe I'm way off here, but my perception of that is like you don't want to like shoot your shot necessarily, right? On the screening interview, but like you want to be well presented and put together like a nice package that you can put in front of a hiring manager to move to that next step. So talk
Well,
about like
I would
what
say
should
do
people
what you
focus
can
on.
do what you can to impress the recruiter. Because
Okay.
so for me, when I was starting, they threw me on SDRs. They're like, we have to hire 25. And I was like, what's an SDR? Who's an SDR? Who are the managers? Like, I don't know anything about this role at all. And they were like, just start screening, like you'll get the hang of it. And I was like, I don't know what the role is. They're like, just ask them, do they have experience with this software, that software, and can they cold call? And that's all you need. And I was sitting there and I was like, okay. But I felt bad because at the time I was, pushing forward people. I was like, oh, well, they have it, they have it. And I kept getting told by the hiring managers, they don't have a sales personality. They don't have a sales personality, yada, yada, yada. And so I say, like, just like bring whatever you can because like the recruiter doesn't know everything all the time. Like I was hiring for roles that I had in my brain I had no business hiring for because I was like, these people are asking for like 200K, whatever. But I just say, if you have like experience with softwares, if you have like hard skills is what you want to show the recruiter, and they're also looking for like soft skills for like company fit, because that's our job as like an extension of HR, is to make sure, okay, like, are they going to be a fit for the company as well?
Mhm. Talk a little bit about how you frame different things, whether it's a layoff or restructure that you went through, or really
Mhm.
just setting up maybe your soft skills that are transferable. How do you explain some of those things?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of the soft skills that, especially for SDRs, we look for is like motivation. So just highlighting those, like why you're doing so. And then another thing I've been recommending for people that have gone through layoffs is getting a letter of recommendation. I feel like that kind of will give the next hiring manager like a peace of mind, because just having that little recommendation letter from your manager, like even if they were laid off too, like it's just a little bit, and I feel like it kind of goes a long way. And then what I've been telling people is I've been telling people not to write that their role ended, and kind of just keeping it to say like until present. Just because some people are like, oh, you got laid off, you were fired, like, and you're just trying to cover it up. Like I feel like some people have that mindset, um, and so I don't want that to be like a deciding factor in people getting a job or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you have a huge gap, then you can't hide that. But I think what would
Mhm.
be important there is like, I wouldn't discount somebody if they have a gap, especially nowadays, right? Because you've got COVID, there's a gap, and all these other kinds of things that are happening. But I think if you could tell me what you've been doing to continue to stay on top of your game or prepare yourself for your next role, I think that becomes sort of mentally tells me, okay, well, this guy's in the game or this gal's in the game.
Mhm.
She's not just like looking for a job because she's desperate. She's been out of work or he's been out of work for 9 months. But that they've seriously been looking or they've been trying to decide on really what they want to do. Maybe they've got other personal things going on in between. I mean, look, I had a gap. I decided to, I had gotten let go from my job, and then I had about a 6 month gap, really, when I started interviewing, because I decided to stay home with my son. He was a baby. I
Mhm.
mean, that's very rare. Men don't, most guys will go back to work and, at least not to be chauvinistic or anything, but like usually you don't have Mr. Moms, but I was, for a few months, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I told that to people on the interview. I was like, they're like, "Oh, what have you been doing in the last few months?" And I'm like, "I've been home with my son, enjoying my time with my son." So I think, yeah, like you said, Zach, it's like how you frame those things becomes critical.
Hmm.
And I think if you do have the gap, if you're not going to say you're to present, at least be able to explain what you've been doing to keep yourself sharp, your skills sharp, or
Mhm.
how you're preparing yourself for the next role.
Yeah, what I recommend is so people that are doing like LinkedIn learnings, Coursera, things like that, like different certifications. I actually have been adding like a section to the top of the resume, whatever the job title is. So like SDR, I like type it on sales development representative, and then I'll do like whatever boot camp, whatever thing that they wrote, and then every single like certification courses that they're doing, outbound calls they're making to hiring managers, like how like their connect rates, whatever data that they have. Like I've been kind of pulling it for their job search and putting it as like, okay, like this is their, SDR training. I'm kind of framing it that way. So then that way you can kind of show like, oh, like I watched all of these, videos, podcasts. I got this certification in cold calling, but from whatever, doing things like that.
I'm wondering, do you think today, I mean, because like we talk about, I was just thinking like, should hiring managers be telling, in the interview process, let's say they're trying to hire SDR. And of course, we all talk about how hard the job is and there's rejection and there's all this stuff. But it's changing, right? Like, I mean, it's really like the job role, the responsibilities and the skill set necessary to be successful potentially in the role is somewhat shifting to, having the ability to, leverage social and email and Instagram, or I guess if you say socials, all the channels, right? And so, the skill set of just being able to withstand rejection isn't
Mhm.
really that important, really. Like, and I don't think there's necessarily like a lot of people say you should talk to SDRs about really how the role is, because how many really come into that role, get hung up 90 times, and say, I didn't expect this,
A
right?
lot.
Like,
Yeah, like the turnover
Well,
in SDRs is higher than any other role in tech.
sure.
Because I feel like personally it's because it's the only entry level role really at a lot of companies. And so people out of school are like, "Oh, I want to go into marketing." And then they go into SDR and they're like, "I hate this." And then 6 months later, an entry level marketing role opens up and they move. So like that's really what happens, I feel like. And then on top of that, there's the people that didn't know what SDR really was. They're like, "Oh, I can cold call." They're making 150 calls a day and they hate their life. And they're like, I don't like talking on the phone. So I feel like, a lot of people have to be in the role to kind of learn because, 100 calls a day doesn't sound like a lot, I don't know, for somebody. And then they go in and they're like, this is takes all day. It's terrible. Nobody likes me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so
You can
much to unpack
you can
right there.
evoke some very strong feelings with a lot of those things. It's yeah, and it's amazing that's kind of the mentality that we've stuck with for all this time. Is that it's an entry level role, so we're just gonna put our folks that are fresh out of high school into the most like treacherous environment on the phone.
I,
And
I
then
literally
we
asked that
wonder why
question.
programs aren't successful with business development. So I think
I I was
oh,
like, I've
go,
literally asked the VP of business development. I was like, why are we hiring people straight out of college rather than hiring people that came from like a different industry of sales?
Mhm.
And like this was in my first week, and he was like, because that's how we always have done it. And I was like, okay. I was like, and I told him, I was like, well, I'm not just gonna find you people fresh out of college. I was like, if I find you somebody else, you still have to interview them. And he ended up hiring a couple of them from like transferring industries, and he ended up like thanking me. He's like, "Oh, thank you for shifting my perspective," things like that. So,
Yeah. I imagine that's got to be pretty expensive if you're rifling through, SDRs, at every 4 or 6 months, just complete turnover. You're starting fresh.
Well, it's weird, Zach. I mean, we're going through these iterations right over the last year. I mean, it's like, you the role. I think the way it's always been. Again, that always been comment, right? This is the way it's been. Is hard to stop, but it's like, yeah, you want to put a whole lot of people on this top of funnel so that you can build a pipeline because the VC or the CEO, whatever, says that's the way to generate new business. The more opportunities we have in front of clients, then the more we'll be able to potentially push things into the pipeline and close, right? And so let's beef up the SDRs, but we're not going to pay SDRs $80,000 a year, right? We're going to pay them
mhm,
$45,000 a year. And so who's going to take a $45,000 salary? Somebody straight out of college or 2 years out of college or a year out of college.
No.
Well, maybe not even today, right? Some of them are coming out of college thinking they could get $60,000, $70,000 jobs. And they could potentially in some cases, but I think that's the problem, right? Because they put all these people this is the way it's always been done. Yeah, and the way it's always been done is the churn, right? So you get those
mhm,
people in, they either churn out or they get promoted or they move on to another company or maybe they move to marketing, like you said, right?
mhm,
Which, by the way, if you are, as we continue to talk about the alignment of sales and marketing, right? It's always good, I think, to be honest, to have a marketing it's somebody who really wanted to be marketing that gets forced into an SDR role for 6 months and then does just good enough to at least keep their job and then move into the marketing role, or at least is communicating throughout the whole process that that's where they feel like they really should be.
mhm,
I think is good. I mean, it's good to experience that, I mean, if you experience it negative, like if you're not really good at it, or if you're not working to be good at it, it's gonna suck, right? It's gonna
mhm.
be like you said earlier, like, oh, I hate this,
I
right? But
feel
do
like
you really hate it? Like,
a lot of hiring managers won't hire people that want to go into different areas. I feel like some majority of hiring managers, I want to say like 90% of hiring managers I've talked to, they want somebody that's going to stay in sales forever. Like they don't want to lose their SDRs
Mhm.
at all. And then on top of that, if they are going to lose them, then they have to become an AE and like that's it. And so that's like the kind of mindset I've noticed from these SDR managers.
well, hey, look, I mean, not to knock him, but we had somebody on the show who said like one of the things that he asked on an interview is, "How do I get your job?" And while I like that motivation, I think you should be focused on the role that you're interviewing for. You shouldn't really be. I mean, there's a way to frame those questions about what your succession plan could look like. And that's maybe the word you use, like, hey, what's the succession plans like here? Like, how often do SDRs move into other roles? Not like, how do I get your role? Or, how quickly I think he said, oh, the guy told him it would take him so long. And he's like, I want to do it in 3 months or 6 months. And I'm like, see, that would be a flag to me a little bit, because I'd be like,
I feel like you could say it in a good way though. Like if the
there is a good way to say
interviewer
it.
asks you like, what are your goals? And then I have definitely said like to be in your shoes, like like I've
Sure.
said that before, and I feel like that's like a
Yeah.
right way to say it. Like, oh yeah, like one day I do want to be a director of talent acquisition or whatever it is.
And the thing is, you got to show up and just make something happen, right? Like figure out, is there a framework in this company to make a move like that? And then to me, the next logical thing is just show up, do the work, perform well, and then those things are going to fall into place, where they need to. I mean, obviously there's other things that play into that, right? Like workplace politics and all the fun stuff that goes along with it. But generally speaking, right? Like in a perfect world, you show up, do the work, like things progress how they should, or you leave.
Plus, I think you ask those questions too because you want to know that you have the opportunity to move into other roles or growth or whatever. Who wants to know that they want to be in sales for their whole life or that role their whole life? I mean, nobody wants to be an SDR their whole life except crazy people like me and you, Zach. But again, to the point earlier, which I didn't really kind of get into, which is like, it's not always necessarily an entry level role, right? Like to really be good at it and successful at it and really understand how to develop a strong, sustainable pipeline and dig into the value prop and know who you're going after, who's the problem you solve and who you solve it for, and where those people live and how long it might take you to get those people to turn around on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. It's important to have some longevity in that role. And quite honestly, and I'll plug the outsourced SDR world, that's really the way you're going to get it. Because in an outsourced SDR world, you don't have to worry about churn. You don't have to worry about them leaving. You don't have to worry about them complaining. You don't have to worry about, what I'm saying, like as SDR out, as an outsourced SDR team, they're always there. It's like you don't have to worry. There's no politics you have to even manage, like you were saying, office politics earlier, or even culture. It's just like they're not in your organization. So all you have to be as a hiring manager, if you're looking at outsourced SDR, all you have to be concerned with is results, really.
And you're dealing with people who generally speaking want to be there and really care about doing it the right way, which
we do.
Big benefit. So
yeah, plug in the sales longevity and carrot. Well, hey, I don't know. Do you have any other questions, Zach? Or Zaya, would you like to add anything about how SDRs could better themselves in their interview process? Any final words?
Yeah, so final words, I'd say be an SDR on your job search. That's the best way to prove you can be an SDR in a role. So, multi-threading your approach, because, if SDRs only filled out people's, general forms to book a meeting, they wouldn't book any meetings. So I say think about it like that.
Zach?
Yeah, great point of advice there. It's getting increasingly more difficult, I'm sure, to stand out, getting in front of the right people. So anything you can do to show those things early on is certainly going to be helpful. So
Other than HotRecruiter.io, Zaya, anywhere else we could check you out, or anything, any content you got going on? Are you on Instagram or TikTok or anything like that?
Yeah, so I will be on TikTok starting January 1st. I used to do it, but not as much anymore. So going to get back into it. And then, just LinkedIn mostly.
Oh, and you have potentially a boot camp coming up, right? Perhaps in March?
Yeah, so I'm looking at March or April. Still trying to work things out, like building out the course. It's taking a little bit longer than I expected. So yeah, don't have quite a start date yet, but it will be like a recruiting boot camp.
Which we're not seeing. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these SDR boot camps, but I don't think I've seen too many, or if at all, any recruiting boot camp.
Yeah, no, I was like, there was only one when I was on my job search last year, and it was like $500, and it was like super duper like short. Like one of my friends that was on the job search did it, and it was just like the easiest thing on earth. And pretty much I got all of that same information from YouTube, and she was so upset. But yeah, so I'm working on building a boot camp that is, can help can help people from like any industry get into recruiting and then actually be credible and actually have that sort of experience, so then that way they can, be successful in the role. Because I want to say every single recruiting job description that I see is like a minimum of like 1 to 2 years of like recruiting experience, and it doesn't make sense because how are you supposed to get it without having it? So yeah, that's why I wanted to build a boot camp for it.
So it's actually a recruit for recruiters, not for like to get better at your job search in general for any kind of person, but specifically for recruiting.
Yeah, so like break into recruiting boot camp.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Well, yeah. So anybody who's listening and watching this on the replay, for sure, man, check that out if you want to get into the recruiting space. And quite honestly, with all the layoffs, I think, in the new year, if you want to get into recruiting, you probably have a banner year.
Yeah. Pretty good
Yeah.
transition from a sales role, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's very similar.
A lot of the like sourcing is an SDR. It's the same exact thing, and then recruiting is like the AE. So that's how it's exactly the same.
Well, that's a great take. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah. Well, that was Zaya, we appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been great learning some insights in the recruiting side of things and getting better at the job hunt. So,
Yeah, thank you
yeah,
for having me.
our pleasure. We'll be back next Thursday at 8 a.m. What? I'm getting the baseball signals there, Mark.
No, I was like 2 and 2. I was doing like the Chuck Woolery thing again, I guess.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah, next week, 8 a.m. Eastern, we'll see you
Yeah.
back here on SDR Insider. Go check out HotRecruiter.io, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Zaya.
Thank
Have a good
you.
one.
You too.
Bye, everybody.